we're privileged to have with us, and I'm privileged to be conversing with Dr. Penny Olsen, the author of this long overdue work on the oeuvre of Neville's Cayley. And I'm looking to ask some questions of Penny that may elicit some more information about those two gentlemen. But to start off affairs, Toastmasters will inform that Public Speaking 101 should involve lightening the mood for the audience, which generally involves a very badly directed joke. And much to my wife's annoyance and deep anxiety, here we go. A postman looking to deliver a parcel came up to a fence, and on the fence was a sign that read, "Warning, dangerous parrot." And you'll notice the bird related anecdote here. And he looked at the veranda, and there was this very placid looking parrot sitting looking at him from his cage. And the postman thought, that's absolutely ridiculous, dangerous parrot, what on earth can that mean? So unfazed, he walked up the driveway and stood next to the parrot and looked it in the eye, at which point it screeched, "Kill him, Rex." Glad we've got that out of the way, Penny.
Who was Rex?
The one, the dog.
Yeah.
Just starting on the process of your publication, because I don't know how these things work, not being author of any works, let alone the body of works to which you've contributed. Where did the idea of publishing Cayley Son come from?
Well, I've always wondered why there hasn't been a biography of either or both of the Cayleys. They've been so prominent in ornithology for so many years. It's 80 odd years since What Bird Was That was first published, unbelievably, and we all used it, or a lot of us used it to identify our birds in the early days because there was nothing else that was affordable back then. And I got, when I went to university, I got a Cayley scholarship, which was set up by the son to honour the father using some of the royalties from this book. And that helped me with my field research for my PhD. So I sort of felt I owed them a bit. And then I started writing books for the National Library, and I discovered they have a marvellous collection of Cayleys, some 100 odd Cayleys, father and son. So there was the opportunity.
Fabulous indeed it was. We've heard little from Alison as to your connection with her society. Could you just talk us through the process of the journey from germ of an idea to realisation of work?
Well, these days it involves turning on your computer. Because there is so much online, as more and more comes online all the time. You can access genealogical information from overseas, from England, whereas once you have to go over there yourself and manually turn through all the records. So more and more is online. But also, as Alison said, you try to meet the relatives and people like David who are Cayley fans, Cayley collectors. Just pursue every avenue. That's part of the fun, the thrill of the chase and all that.
And in that regard, as part of your research, did you unearth anything that particularly surprised you about the Cayleys that you weren't expecting?
Oh, yeah, yes and no, I suppose. Yeah, I think I was very surprised at how much Neville William did, the son.
Absolutely prodigious in the 1930s. Book after
staggering. Books and talks and involvement in the Broad League and painting and exhibitions and just on and on and on. So I think that was a big surprise. And I guess also just the variety, the breadth of the paintings that they both did, the great variety and I guess quality of their works varied considerably too. yeah.
On the subject of Cayley Senior, your book observes that he arrived in Melbourne in 1877 with a background in silk making. Did he fall into artwork shortly after his arrival? Is it something that developed over a period of time?
Yes, I wasn't able to find out a lot about his early life because he, it seems like he fled the family, came from a wealthy Norwich family of silk merchants, and he started training as an apprentice in another firm. And he and his brother, it seems like they did a bump to Australia and fell out with the family and changed their names slightly when they got here. And yes, so his early life, I presume he went to a good school and studied drawing and things, but he seems to have hit the ground running when he got here. There were very soon after he arrived, there were advertisements for his paintings in the newspapers, not necessarily birds at that point.
Did your research inform how he developed his niche in particularly bird art?
I think it was sort of natural selection. That's what people admired most amongst his works. He seems to badly wanted to have been a landscape painter, but didn't have a lot of success
The reviews weren't exactly glowing.
No.
So, do you think that society at the time promoted his pursuit of bird art? He was catering to a market?
I think he was, yes. It was a time when there was a lot more wealth, the gold rushes and things, and people could afford to buy a painting and hang it on the wall. And if you're a sportsman, you liked his sort of trophy paintings, the ones with the unfortunate birds falling out of the sky, but which we probably don't quite approve of these days, but or hanging, curing in a larder with the blood dripping from them. But yeah, so I think he found a ready market, and also there was increasing pride in all things Australian. Then also lead up to a federation, and we were becoming more proud of our birds and not looking to England as home, and being nostalgic for nightingales and things like that so much. So.
An enormous body of his work involved, as you say, shot things, either in the act of being shot or as a result of being shot and hung on game riders and the like. Was that reflective of what society looked to at the time?
I suspect so, yeah.
Fabulous. Because his Neville Jr., of course, didn't pursue that sort of art at all, other than in his very early times when he was mimicking his father.
Yes, it was no longer acceptable by that time too. I think they realised the world isn't endless and you can't just, and I suppose by then, in the early days, and Cayley was always destitute, so I think the birds were actually, for him and a lot of people, sustenance.
Because he seemed to take flight almost as often as his birds. How would you characterise his paintings? And did the style of his paintings change over the years?
As a senior?
Senior.
I think they improved over the years in general,
Yet, a bit like the girl with the curl, when he was good, he was very, very good, and when he was bad, he was horrible. Do we have a theory as to why that might have been?
I think he was a notorious drinker, and I wondered, some people have questioned that, but all the evidence suggests that in fact he was, that he'd clock up bills, not only for his drinking, but for accommodation and things that his wife needed, and he wasn't able to pay, so he whipped up a painting as payment. And I suspect some of those he didn't take a lot of care over. He just whipped something up to pay his bills and then left town. He moved very frequently, more than
most.
More than most, yes. More often than every second year he was on the move. So you have to suspect that's fleeing his debts.
A continuum in his life was one William Andhoven. What was he to Neville Senior, and why?
It's Aldenhoven. sorry. William Alvin Hogan was a gallery, sorry.
I've been corrected by the expert.
He was a gallery owner, and he took Cayley Senior under his wing and really promoted him, and I suspect kept him off the streets for quite a few years while things were good.
I noticed that in the credits to the book, which contains, I think you mentioned, all but 10 or so of the NLA's works of both the Cayleys, that any number of the works of Cayley Senior in the NLA's collection are hand-painted lithographs as opposed to watercolours. Is there a history to that?
Cayley Senior wanted to do a book like this. They're both bird lovers and wished everybody else was, and it was actually Cayley Senior's idea to do a book on birds, but techniques for publishing, especially in colour, which is so important for bird identification, cost was too prohibitive. But he did make a start. He did a little book, I think it had 7 or so illustrations in it, and he prepared a whole lot more, but they're actually photographs and they were hand-coloured. And he did it himself in the back room at the publishers. But yes, as you can imagine, that's a terribly painful way to make a whole heap of books. And it didn't happen, and I was left to the son to realise the dream.
When you, as I have had the privilege of reading Penny's work, you'll see that in the works of Cayley Senior, except when hanging on kitchen dresses, his birds are rarely drawn casting a shadow. Why is that?
Well, I'm not an artist, but I believe it's because he worked from flat skins a lot. So he'd shoot the bird, and it is in the literature that someone described it.
It's quite an impactful way of doing your art,
take
isn't
the
it?
body out and then
Shoot it.
preserve the flat skin. So then you
Good
wouldn't
thing you
have
didn't
an
get into
idea.
portraiture.
Well, he did a bit.
Thankfully not in my lifetime. Thought that might have been.
So I think he just didn't really know how light fell on them. And of course in those days there weren't binoculars and digital cameras and all that kind of thing. So he had this flat preserved skin to work from, and whatever memory he had of them in the wild.
Do you subscribe to the theory of it might even be an urban myth that Cayley Senior was widely plagiarised?
I do, but I wasn't able to really sort that out. It was a bit beyond me.
And I think you mentioned in your book that his plagiariser, who may have been Tom Flowers or Flower, his copies were often better drawn than Senior himself. Does that mean that we collectors should be proud to have a fake? Good. Somebody take a file note. Finally, on Cayley Senior, I believe there's a connection with this very venue, Mosman Library, and Cayley Senior. Just shed that light on us.
Yes, it's stretching it a bit, but Donna actually told me this. It wasn't something I found out myself. That Mosman Public School, when it opened, had a hall. The entrance hall or something was filled with the works of Cayley Senior. I don't know how that came about. That was a year after his death, so perhaps Olsen or someone donated them, or it was a collector who donated them. And the other connection is with Junior, which is through Taronga Zoo and the controversial director of the zoo back in those times, Sir Edward Hallstrom, who was actually a bit of a supporter of Cayley Junior.
And the manufacturer of the Silent Night.
Yes,
Refrigerator.
that's how he made his cash, yeah. Amongst other things. He was meant to be a bit of a smuggler of rare parrots and things behind the scenes. But because he was such a, great benefactor, that people turned a blind eye. But one of the people he supported was Cayley Junior, and he paid for a set of parrots to be done for the Royal Zoological Society, and also a second set which has gone to the, he donated to the National Library,
which really forms the body of his works in the library's collection.
Mm. But he also helped Junior out when he was, both Cayleys, even though they were hugely popular, they died with next to nothing. So Horstrom also helped Cayley Junior out when he, towards the end of his life, when he wasn't able to work much anymore, and was struggling.
Well, turning now to Neville Junior. His father died at 48 when Neville was only 17 years of age. Was Neville Junior painting at that time, or did his interest in art develop subsequent to his father's death?
I think he must have painted with his father. So I couldn't find any direct evidence of that, but he certainly went out into the bush with his father and learnt about birds with him and with their Aboriginal companion. I could find some evidence for that. But he didn't seem to start painting, well, no public evidence of his painting, except for billy carts. He worked for a while painting billy carts soon after his father's death. So that sort of artistic outfit didn't last very long.
15 bob a week.
Yeah, that's right. And I think Aldenhoven encouraged him to start up, but he wasn't ready. He was off surfing and having a good time on the beach. So he wasn't ready until he was in his 30s, and then he took it up with a vengeance.
And do we know whether there was a cathartic moment? Was it pursuing other interests that caused him to fall more and more into art, not just bird art? He's well known, particularly later, works for mammals and fish. So he had an enormous body of work outside that of just birds, unlike his father.
Yeah. I think he found a niche in the world of science, where his father seemed to seek to be more part of the artistic world, and he was part of the artistic world. He belonged to the Society of Artists, and his work was selected for these shows, and it was bought by galleries. But the son never seemed to have sought that sort of thing. He enjoyed more the scientific side of things and conservation, and so I think when the Gould League got going and all of that, he found a bit of a niche.
So do you think unlike his father, who painted for a living, would you agree that Neville Junior's works were driven by his other pursuits? He was actually illustrating passions for conservation and ornithological accuracy.
Yes, I think much more so than the father, yeah.
George Robertson appears prominently. I'll get these names right. Appears prominently in the life of Neville Junior.
Yes.
Who was he, and what was his influence on Neville Junior?
Well, George, we all know it's a publishing house. George started the publishing house and ended up running it himself. He started in partnership with Angus, but Angus dropped out fairly early. And George was a great supporter of Australian talent. Again, at a time when a lot of the stuff Australians read were written in England, and the novelists and things were often English, and the information we got, any science and things, came from England. George was a great supporter of Australian artists and poets, and so May Gibbs, he took May Gibbs under his wing, and Henry Lawson, and Banjo Patterson, and Cayley Junior, and promoted their works.
How would you characterise Junior's style of bird art compared to his father's?
Well, I think, as we said, he aimed to be more scientific, and he was certainly more accurate in terms of the details of the bird. He did a much greater variety of birds. He tried to paint every Australian bird. He was aiming to do the big bird book at one stage before this one came out. whereas his father tended to stick to the more popular, so I guess, saleable magpies and kookaburras and those sort of iconic birds for that era.
I gather that unlike your book, which found its way onto the shelves not too long after your thorough research, that What Bird Is That?, the seminal field guide on Australian birds, had a rocky road. Why was that?
Gosh. Well, Kaye started writing what came to be known as the Big Bird book for Angus and Robertson. And it ended up, then there's 700 odd species of birds in Australia. So, huge job, as you can imagine. He wanted to do the various plumages and their eggs, and had everybody writing about the taxonomy and nesting, and a cast of thousands involved, even colour charts, and it went on and on and on. He started it with a bunch of other people in 1918, and by about 1922, George Robertson had enough, because it still was miles off, and it was going to cost a fortune to publish. And what was the Royal Australasian Ornithological Association back then, which is now BirdLife Australia, were arguing about how many species we had and what to call them, and even common names they couldn't agree on. So there was a continually changing list of birds to be done, and Cayley was pulled to and fro, and anyway, but eventually George Robertson spat the dummy, and famously Cayley wasn't happy and was famously thrown out of the offices of Robertson, and they later made up, and Robertson suggested doing this much more contained book, and it finally happened.
And did the public warmly receive it when it first hit the shelves?
No, they didn't. So the initial sales were very slow until after the war, when American soldiers were here on R&R, and they brought it up big time to take home as souvenirs, and that really made it take off. And as we know, it's still in print.
By which time I gather he'd sold his rights to the royalties to the Bilby.
Yes.
And hence your scholarship, which funded until 97 or thereabouts.
You have to remind me if you say so.
It's in the book. I'm a lawyer, and as a wise barrister once said, never ask a question you don't know the answer to. Turning now to both senior and junior, you mentioned that neither made their fortune from their bodies of work, which seems extraordinary given the breadth of it and the quality of it. Do either or both of them have a lasting significance to ornithology today?
Well, I think they do. They most homes, most of us would have, or any of you who are birdie would have grown up with this. So Cayley names, in our heads here, and it influenced a whole generation of people to go into ornithology and study birds. And I actually think that to some extent they would help start the bird watching movement in this country just by making birds accessible. I mean, before this book, all there was were the great big folios, beautiful but expensive and very rare folios of people like John Gould and Matthews and things, which most people couldn't afford. So yeah, I think they were very significant, yes.
Except for the old man, who seemed to revel in receiving shot birds and or shoot them himself and to paint them. Leaving that to one side, difficult though it may be, did both of them have a significance to conservation?
I probably think that it wasn't on the seniors' agenda because, like I said earlier,
reflected the society at the time.
We thought the world was endless back then, and we didn't have much of an impact, which obviously didn't turn out to be the case. But yeah, Cayley Junior certainly was a strong advocate for conservation. His training in the as an advocate for surf lifesaving served him well when it came to birds.
Ladies and gentlemen, that about exhausts my line of questioning. I'm sure that there must be some questions you have of Penny. She's more than happy to take questions from the audience, after which the lights will be turned on in the exhibition. And lest it remain unsaid, and as it will have occurred to you, these sorts of exhibitions that we're going to benefit from, I don't think you'll see the likes of collections behind me all in one place anytime soon, don't happen by osmosis. Can I publicly thank the Mosman Library for its foresight in convening the venue, or allowing the venue for the exhibition, and in particular, can I thank, on behalf of all of us, Donna Braye, who once again has curated a magnificent exhibition for the wonderment of all of us.